Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and in today's video we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories. Specifically, the conspiracy theories that don't seem to want to die. In other words, let's talk about stuff that we believe about space that's very likely, and actually almost likely, completely false. Welcome to What the Math. Now we're going to start this video with probably the most famous conspiracy theory related to space, and that's of course the moon landing. There are quite a lot of people out there that still believe that the moon landing was faked, despite all of the evidence to the otherwise. So why do people still believe that it has been faked, that it's actually something that never happened, and why do people are so passionate about it? Well, the passion part I can't really explain. I guess some people just choose to believe things. But let's explain, or let's talk about some of the reasons some people may think that it's not real. So we're going to land in this crater on the moon right here. We're going to go into, like, I guess the deeper part and just look into the skies. So when you look at the pictures of the moon from the Apollo missions, you may notice that there is actually no stars present. And so this is one of the reasons so many people believe that the moon landings were faked. Now, did you notice how I changed the exposure level to make the stars disappear? And this is actually the same reason why there are no stars in those photos. They're simply not visible because those cameras could not actually provide enough exposure to capture all the stars. The moon is bright enough that the reflection from the moon basically caused it to look kind of like daylight on Earth. So in other words, when you take a picture on Earth, you don't really see the stars either. And this is why the moon pictures had no stars in them. It's simple camera mechanics. You can try this yourself in a brightly exposed place and try to capture things outside a window if your room is really, really bright. Anyway, one of the other things that is often mentioned about the moon conspiracy theory is that the flag was either moving or not moving in those photos and in those videos. Now, obviously there is no atmosphere on the moon, so the flag shouldn't be moving, but it was moving for two specific reasons. One of those reasons was that when the flag was actually placed into the moon's ground, it created a bit of a vibration, and that sort of started to oscillate the flag. On the other hand, there's a picture of a flag almost looking like it's flapping, and this was actually specifically created for that picture by the astronauts, because when they just left the flag hanging there, it looked absolutely horrible. So they've created a kind of oscillation using these wire cables to make it look as if it was waving. It was simply for the picture effect, not to confuse people later on in years to come. But anyway, that's enough about the moon. Let's go to the next conspiracy theory, which is maybe a little bit less known. And this one is going to take us to the planet Venus. Now, a long time ago, several decades ago, the Soviet Union was able to land several probes on Venus, and they even took a few photos that were then sent back to planet Earth. Many of these photos were quite incredible and showed us quite a lot about the surface of Venus, but specifically more recently, a lot of the Russian scientists started to question not the realism of this mission, but to question what was actually filmed both on those photos and also in the videos that were sent. There are a few videos from Venus that indicate that something was actually moving on the surface. And in 2012, a very prominent Russian scientist actually reported that those Venera missions, as they were known, may have actually captured the photos and the videos of living organisms on this very difficult to survive on planet that has ridiculously high atmospheric pressures, very high temperatures, and is very acidic in nature as well. But what exactly did they see? They did see motion, and it's kind of actually possible to see the motion in those videos if you ever watch them. But the reality is that the motion that was visible was from the camera covers that were on the cameras that were protecting those camera lenses. It may seem like a cheesy explanation, but it's actually true, probably because of the simple fact that they've seen similar motions, practically exactly the same motion in every single Venera mission, pretty much in the same region around the Venera probe. and it was something man-made. It wasn't really any organism. So the conspiracy theory here is only based on the observation of what basically was made by people. And there's really any evidence to the otherwise, specifically to the existence of life on Venus. However, not to discredit some of the scientific theories, there has been actually some unusual detection of methane and a lot of other unusual gas-like interaction in the atmosphere of Venus that might be related to life. But this is something that we'll need to discover later on. Anyway, let's go to Mars. Mars is full of conspiracy. Now, I guess the most popular theory, conspiracy theory about Mars is the infamous face on Mars. This was from the Viking 1 mission back in 1976 that used its relatively poor camera to capture a piece of rock, basically, that sort of resembled a face. This created quite a lot of discussion, both on the internet and obviously in various conspiracy circles. But the follow-up picture that was taken by the Mars Global Surveyor in 1998 and also in 2001 basically showed us that this was just a brick. Not a brick. It was just a piece of rock with light and shadows in the right formation that made it resemble a face. Now, there's quite a lot of other conspiracy theories about Mars, including some of the older ones. For years, people believed that if you look at Mars from a distance, you could actually kind of see these strange channels, or canali as they were called. Now, I'm not sure if I'll be able to display it here, as it's kind of difficult to recreate, and we actually haven't seen them since the first mention of them, like almost like 100 years ago. Yeah, you don't really see anything that resembles those canali here, but you can kind of see there's a bit of a channel-like structure. Now, these canyon structures, or these canali, were thought to be created by the aliens. And it was even mentioned in the novel by Percival Lowell, who wrote about them, and many people actually believed it to be true. And later on, a lot of these conspiracy theories sort of culminated in the widespread panic during the 1938 radio performance of the H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. And it was so well performed on the radio, it was so well dramatized that many people believed that Martians are actually invading Earth, created a widespread panic around the United States. And some people even thought of suing the radio station for creating so much panic. But all of this was obviously based on misunderstanding of Mars to begin with. When we landed on Mars, we realized there's nothing here, it's a desert. On top of that, there's almost no atmosphere, and the planet is very difficult to survive on. If there is any life here, it's probably going to be underneath the surface, but we still haven't found it, even though we've been looking for the past decade or so using various robotic probes. So, all in all, even though Mars is full of various conspiracy theories, scientifically speaking, it's a pretty boring, dry world. And honestly, I don't even know why we want to go back there. But speaking of unusual theories, we can't really do this video about conspiracy theories without talking about the infamous flat Earth theory. Theory? Is it even a theory? I don't know. I don't know what to call it. There's a whole body of people believing that Earth is flat, including, of course, some of the celebrities, which probably make this a lot more popular. If it wasn't for the celebrities like the basketball player Shaquille O'Neal, that seems to post a lot of things supporting this unusual belief, I don't think people would believe it at all. But anyway, yeah, there's people that believe Earth is flat. They even try to prove it using various unusual experiments. But really, there's nothing to say about this except for the fact that, you know, try explaining your cell phone reception without satellites. And if there are satellites in space, how are they staying around flat Earth? Most importantly, if you ever fly an airplane, not by looking through a side window, but by actually looking through a cockpit, you can clearly see a very round horizon, which would be almost impossible to explain if you were on a flat Earth, right? Because here the horizon is pretty flat, pretty straight. Anyway, we're not going to talk much about this, but this theory not theory, I keep calling it theory. This belief is there, and I guess some people still believe it. And this kind of gives you an idea that, you know, given enough information and misinformation, you can really make anyone believe anything. If you were to kind of remove the important facts and add just enough information to support your point, you could really make people believe in absolutely anything, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. So there you go. Flat Earth. Not going to talk about this anymore. But we also have quite a lot of apocalyptic theories and beliefs, and I guess the most famous one is that there is somewhere a planet, often called Nibiru, that will one day arrive to Earth and kill us all. This is actually a belief that was first mentioned in a 1976 book known as the 12th Planet. Now, let's go check out if we can even find anything that will resemble a planet past Pluto, but unfortunately there's really nothing out there that we've detected so far that even remotely resembles a planet. So we're going to go to Pluto instead, which used to be a 9th planet, but no longer it is. So anyway, Nibiru. What exactly is it? Well, this person by the name of Zakaria Sitchin, who wrote the book, basically stipulated, based on some kind of an ancient Sumerian interpretation, that it's a planet beyond Neptune, and it basically orbits the sun every 3,600 years. We've looked for many different objects using the telescope by the name of WISE. It was supposed to detect anything bigger than Neptune, at a distance of up to about maybe 4 light years away, and we've found nothing. This is actually one of the reasons why most people think that Planet 9 even doesn't exist, and Planet 9 has quite a lot of scientific support behind it. But nevertheless, we don't think that there's anything out there. But most importantly, we don't think there's anything that's going to collide with Earth pretty much any time in the next few billion years. We've done a lot of simulations on various asteroids and various large objects, and they're not going to come even close to our planet for a long, long time. But this, of course, doesn't stop people from always hypothesizing about some kind of a collision, including, of course, Pluto that we just came from. Basically saying that, you know, every 3 months there's always someone saying that something will collide with Earth, an asteroid, a planet, or maybe even a star. And I guess the most famous asteroid that was supposed to recently destroy our planet was Apophis. Apophis was an asteroid that NASA actually observed for many years, trying to estimate where it's going to approach our planet Earth. And turns out that, yeah, it is going to, you know, approach planet Earth relatively close in astronomical terms, but it's not going to collide. The chance of the collision was about 1%, and then it was actually reevaluated to like 1 in a million. So even though the orbit of Apophis kind of crosses the orbit of Earth, this is Earth right here, it is not going to do anything to us. It's just not going to collide, and even if it does collide, it's not going to create this apocalyptic-like environment because it's not that big. It's only about 270 meters in radius. So in terms of the actual asteroids that will actually destroy all life on Earth and destroy the humanity, this is not even close to being big enough. So that's Apophis, and that's the idea of things colliding with Earth. So next time you hear about something coming close to Earth and possibly destroying it, take it with a grain of salt. It's not going to happen, probably. And if it is, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Now, these were the major conspiracy theories that I wanted to mention, but there's actually quite a lot of other ones that kind of are worth mentioning as well because they're just a little bit too funky not to talk about. For example, there's one about moon actually turning green on certain days, or moon being hollow on the inside and being a creation of an alien race. Now, the one about alien race I don't really want to talk about, but the one about turning green, I think it stems from the fact that moon does turn red. There's actually something called red moon, and this happens when the shadow of Earth passes over moon, and it does create what's known as a blood moon. But going green is a little bit too far. Now, there's also the ones about moon becoming ridiculously or getting ridiculously close to Earth and basically destroying Earth, or even causing ridiculous tsunamis, which would eliminate humanity. But none of this obviously is going to happen anytime soon, mostly because if you ever look at the orbit of the moon, it is almost entirely perfectly circular, and it's going to stay that way for billions of years. One day maybe the moon will actually fly away from the orbit of Earth, but for now it's going to stay in the stable orbit. It's not coming that much closer. There's also a lot of very recent conspiracy theories that you can probably discover if you go on any of the conspiracy theory forums. And one of the funniest one I thought was actually about the newly discovered hexagon on Saturn. Now, I don't know if you can see it here. It's kind of hard to see. But it's basically this very large storm on one of the polar regions of Saturn. It's kind of here. It's very difficult to, unfortunately, observe it. But the new conspiracy theories suggest that this is some sort of alien technology at work. I'm not sure how they got to that point, how they actually came up with this, but I guess because it's a hexagon, and hexagons are not very common in nature. But one day we'll be able to scientifically explain it and understand why this is actually a hexagon. There's another very unusual conspiracy theory about one of the moons of Saturn known as Iapetus, and there's actually a whole selection of theories about how this is some sort of a alien weaponry, alien doomsday device, or possibly a completely functioning alien spaceship, because it has two very unusual colors and because there's these unusual features on the surface that we don't seem to have on other moons or other objects in space. But that actually just gives us more reasons to study this very unusual moon and discover what's going on the surface here, because this way we'll be able to learn more about colonization of moons and planets in the future. And of course, there's a lot more conspiracy theories related to space back on our planet Earth as well. And I think the most famous one would be the one that actually happened back in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, right here in the United States. And this is, of course, the infamous alien crash that was speculated by many people for many, many years until 1994, when the US finally declassified those documents and released the information about the so-called Project Mogul. Project Mogul was actually obviously a very secretive mission, and there's a reason for that. It was actually a sort of a series of really, really interesting balloons that were launched into upper atmosphere, where they would be responsible for spying on the Soviet nuclear tests. Back then, in 1947, that's when the Soviets just started creating their first nuclear bombs. And that's when the Americans wanted to actually listen to those explosions and find out how powerful they are. So they attached microphones to these balloons, they launched them into upper atmosphere, and those balloons listened to the explosions, nuclear explosions. But one of those balloons accidentally popped and crashed on a farm in Roswell, New Mexico. And that's how the conspiracy theory about aliens crashing in Roswell began, because obviously the technology used in those balloons and the way that all of this collision stuff looked almost alien. These super microphones that nobody has ever seen before, that was only used by the government, looked very mysterious. And so the newspapers back then portrayed it as something of an alien conspiracy, and the US government obviously didn't deny it because they didn't really want anybody in US, and obviously didn't want anyone in Soviet Union to know that they were watching the Soviet nuclear explosions. And you can definitely learn more about Project Mogul by reading about it on the internet. It's actually a pretty cool project that was secretive for many, many years, up to about 40 years, I think. But anyway, that's pretty much all of the conspiracy theories I wanted to cover, except for, of course, one, the most important one. The one that actually might change the face of Earth and the future of humanity. There's one conspiracy theory that has been started very recently and has been actually supported by many, many unusual people. I don't want to call them scientists, but definitely a lot of politicians. And what I'm talking about is the conspiracy theory that states that the climate change caused by the human beings is not real, is not caused by humans, that it's something that is natural and something that does not exist. Now, this is probably one conspiracy theory that we all need to think about very carefully, because people in the government even seem to actually support the idea that the climate change is not real, despite the scientific evidence that it is. And this is one conspiracy theory that we need to really not believe. The climate change is as real as it comes. There's a lot of evidence behind it, and it will affect our planet in the future. So if you are one of the people that might even remotely consider the words of several people in the government that might actually say that climate change is something that is not visible, not important, or doesn't exist, you really need to reconsider it once again, because it's something that is quite widely accepted around the world. Anyway, I didn't want to finish this on a serious note, but I did, and there you have it. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, share this video with someone who enjoys learning through video games and wants to learn more about space and science, and come back tomorrow to learn something else you may have not known. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Let's escape our beautiful planet and fly into outer space. Space out, and as always, bye-bye. Now, I always wondered, why do actually people believe in all of these conspiracy theories? Why do people believe in alien life? Why do people want to believe? And I think the reality is that it is just so much more fun than believing in logical, scientific stuff. Science makes it somehow boring, not interesting, not exciting. It's a lot more important and a lot more fun for people to believe in things that are unexplainable, so they can actually use their emotions as well. Explanations that are scientific are not always the most exciting. But if the explanation is important and if it affects our future, I think we just have to believe it. And this is, of course, something that relates to the climate change. Other conspiracy theories might not really affect us very much, but the one about the climate change will.